The emergency session hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor. Representatives from 247 species sat in their designated atmospheric zones, breathing their preferred gases, existing at their optimal temperatures. The Vrelniks floated in methane clouds. The Korthans stood rigid in superheated zones. The Veshan delegates rested in pools of liquid mercury. Every species had fought for centuries to earn their place in this chamber. Every species believed they represented the pinnacle of civilization in their corner of the galaxy. Today, they were all terrified. Ambassador Zelthic of the Vrelniks Collective called the session to order with a harmonic pulse that translated across every communication device. His gaseous form rippled with anxiety, a tell that every species present could recognize despite their vastly different biologies. "The Devourers have breached the Sentinel line," Zelthic announced. Silence crashed through the chamber like a physical force. 43 solar systems have gone dark in the past rotation. The Korthan Defense Fleet, the most powerful military force in known space, engaged them at the Helios Junction. Zelthic paused, his form condensing with grief. 3,000 warships entered that battle. 7 escaped. A Veshan delegate's translation device crackled to life. The mathematical models predicted we had another century before they reached this far into civilized space. How did they accelerate so quickly? "They're consuming faster," a Korthan general responded, his crystalline body glowing hot with rage. "Every world they take, every species they absorb, they grow stronger, smarter. They're using our own technology against us now. Our weapons, our tactics, they learn from every engagement." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted across translation barriers, their words becoming an incomprehensible soup of panic and desperation. Zelthic pulsed desperately for order, but fear had broken the carefully maintained decorum of the council. A soft chime cut through the noise. Then another, and another. The chiming grew louder until it overrode every other sound, forcing silence through sheer acoustic dominance. The chamber's attention turned to the source. Ambassador Corrine of the Archives stood in her environmental pod, her forearms raised in a gesture of urgent significance. The archivists were the oldest species in the council, the keepers of galactic history, the catalogers of 10 million years of recorded civilization. When an archivist spoke, everyone listened. "There is one option we have not discussed," Corrine said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "One possibility that exists in the deep records. The archives contain no weapon capable of stopping the Devourers," the Korthan general snapped. "We've searched every database, every historical conflict. Nothing we've ever created can stop them." "I did not say weapon," Corrine replied. "I said option. And it is not something we created. It is something we avoided." She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the council floor. It showed a small yellow star in a sparse region of space, far from any major trade routes or settled systems. A single planet orbited in the habitable zone, mostly covered in water with scattered landmasses. Designation: Sol 3, common name among its inhabitants, Earth. Confusion rippled through the assembly. The planet looked unremarkable, primitive even. Atmospheric scans showed industrial pollutants. Energy signatures indicated barely coherent fusion technology. No faster-than-light capability. No planetary shields. No unified government. "This is a joke," someone muttered. "The archives do not joke about survival," Corrine said sharply. 10,000 years ago, this species was flagged with a crimson warning. The highest threat designation possible. They were quarantined, isolated, watched from a distance by automated systems. No contact was permitted. No trade, no communication. The council of that era voted unanimously to leave them alone. "Why?" Zelthic asked. They appear barely spacefaring. What possible threat could they pose? Quarren pulled up another file. Images began to flow across the display. Humans in primitive armor, clashing with bronze swords. Humans in trenches, firing chemical propellant weapons across scorched earth. Humans in the void of space, standing on a lifeless moon, having traveled there with technology that should have killed them. Humans splitting atoms, humans splicing genes, humans building machines that thought. They have existed as a technological species for approximately 10,000 of their years, Quarren explained. In that time, they have engaged in over 15,000 documented conflicts among themselves. They have developed and deployed weapons capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable. They have done this while killing each other by the hundreds of millions. And yet they continue. They adapt. They survive. They grow stronger through conflict in ways we cannot comprehend. A Theshan delegate's voice dripped with skepticism. Every species has a violent past. The Korthan conquered 12 systems before joining the Council. This proves nothing. The Korthan conquered for resources and territory, Quarren countered. Humans fight for concepts, for ideas, for symbols. They will die by the thousands for abstractions that have no physical form, honor, freedom, revenge. They passed a phase in their development that every other species in this chamber abandoned after their war. First few centuries of civilization. They retained it, refined it, made it central to their nature. She pulled up a document, text flowing across the screens in angular human script, followed by translations. This is from one of their philosophical treatises, written during one of their most devastating conflicts. I will read a passage. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Empty rhetoric, the Korthan general scoffed. They were being bombed daily. Their cities were burning. They stood alone against an empire that controlled an entire continent. Logic suggested they surrender. Survival probability calculations gave them a less than 8% chance of victory. They fought anyway, and they won. Quarren closed the document and looked across the assembly. The archivists have studied this species for 10 millennia. We have watched them from afar, documented their development, analyzed their psychology. Our conclusion, reached independently by 17 different research teams across multiple centuries, is unanimous. Humans are the most persistently violent, adaptable, and dangerously creative species ever documented. They do not simply fight to survive. They fight because something in their fundamental nature compels them to struggle against any obstacle, any enemy, any limitation placed upon them. Then why haven't they destroyed themselves? Someone asked. Because they are equally capable of cooperation, compassion, and sacrifice, Quarren answered. This is what makes them so dangerous. They can organize their violence, direct it, focus it on external threats with terrifying efficiency. When they are divided, they are merely dangerous to themselves. When they unite around a common enemy, she paused, letting the implication hang. The archives contain no record of any force that united them and survived the encounter. The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at the primitive planet on the display, trying to reconcile Quarren's words with the unremarkable world they saw. You're suggesting we contact them, Zelthic said slowly. Break the quarantine. Ask them to fight the Devourers. I am presenting an option, Quarren replied. The only option I can find in 10 million years of recorded history that offers even a theoretical possibility of survival. The Devourers cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be deterred. Every conventional military force we have thrown at them has failed. We need something unconventional, something the Devourers have never encountered. And if we unleash this species on the galaxy? A delegate asked. If they defeat the Devourers and then turn on us? Quarren's expression was grave. That is a risk. But consider the alternative. In 6 months, perhaps a year, the Devourers will reach the Council core worlds. Everything we have built, every species in this chamber, will be consumed. Extinction is not a risk. It is a certainty, unless we try something different. The vote was called. It took 3 hours of debate, compromise, and desperate calculation. In the end, the decision was nearly unanimous. Ambassador Zelphic sent the signal himself, a simple faster-than-light transmission directed at the Sol system, at the small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The message was straightforward. We need your help. We are dying. Please respond. Then they waited, hoping that the most dangerous species in the galaxy would answer their call, and praying they had not just made a terrible mistake. The signal reached Earth's orbital monitoring, station at 0347 GMT. Dr. Sarah Chun was 3 hours into her shift. Halfway through a cup of terrible coffee, when every alert system in the facility began screaming simultaneously. Her hands flew across the holographic interface, trying to isolate the source. Please tell me this is a malfunction, her supervisor said, appearing behind her shoulder. It's not, Sarah replied, her voice tight. It's a directed transmission. Faster-than-light communication protocol we've never seen before. It's definitely artificial. Definitely extraterrestrial. Within 20 minutes, the facility was locked down. Within an hour, representatives from every major government on Earth had joined a secure video conference. Within 3 hours, the message had been decoded, translated, and verified as authentic by 17 independent teams. The president of the United Earth Coalition stood before the emergency session of the Global Assembly, her face projected on screens across the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not alone in the universe. And the neighbors are in trouble. She played the message. The translation was rough, filtered through hurried linguistic analysis, but the meaning was clear enough. Unknown hostile force. Multiple species threatened. Requesting assistance. Coordinates attached. They're asking us to fight their war, the Chinese premier said bluntly. A war they're apparently losing badly enough to call for help from a species they've never contacted before. The real question is why us, the European Union director added. According to the transmission metadata, there are hundreds of other species out there. Advanced species. Why would they contact a planet that can't even reach its own asteroid belt reliably? Admiral Marcus Webb of the Coalition Defense Force stood to address the assembly. He was old-school military, a veteran of the resource wars, and his face carried the scars to prove it. I've had my team analyzing every byte of data in that transmission. The species that sent it are called the Vrelniks. They included a data package, probably hoping we could decrypt it. We did. It contains strategic assessments of this enemy, these Devourers. He pulled up a holographic display that made several delegates gasp. It showed a spreading darkness across a map of local space, consuming system after system. This enemy doesn't negotiate, doesn't take prisoners, doesn't seem to want anything except to consume every living thing it encounters. The Vrelniks and their allies have thrown everything they have at it. Weapons we can't even comprehend yet. And they're losing. All the more reason to stay out of it, someone argued. If their advanced technology can't stop this threat, what could we possibly contribute? A new voice cut through the debate. Permission to speak? Dr. James Okafor stood, his lanky frame instantly recognizable. The head of the Experimental Weapons Division was rarely seen at political gatherings, preferring his laboratories to conference rooms. His presence meant someone thought his expertise was relevant. Dr. Okafor, the president acknowledged. I've spent the last 2 hours reviewing the tactical data in the alien transmission. Okafor said, pacing as he spoke, his mind clearly racing faster than his words. Their weapons are impressive. Antimatter warheads, molecular disintegration beams, shields that could probably shrug off our best nukes like raindrops. But they all follow predictable physics, predictable tactics. The Devourers have adapted to everything, because everything follows the same logical patterns. He paused, a grim smile crossing his face. We don't fight like that. We never have. When humans go to war, we don't just use weapons. We use terrain, psychology, deception, asymmetric tactics, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. We fight dirty. We fight smart. We fight in ways that make mathematicians cry because the numbers say we should have lost. You're suggesting we actually accept this request? A delegate asked, incredulous. I'm suggesting we have an opportunity here that will never come again, Okafor replied. These aliens have technology that could solve every resource problem Earth faces. Medical advances that could eliminate disease. Energy systems that could end scarcity. And they're desperate enough to share it if we help them. But beyond that, he looked around the room. Humanity has been stuck on one planet for our entire existence, watching the stars and wondering when we'd get our chance to step onto the galactic stage. This is that chance. We can either hide and hope we're not noticed, or we can show the universe what humans can do. The debate raged for 6 more hours. Security concerns, ethical considerations, resource allocation, risk assessment. Every argument for and against was dissected, analyzed, and argued until voices grew hoarse. In the end, it was Admiral Webb who cut through the noise. I've spent 40 years preparing for threats to Earth, training soldiers to protect our people. Every simulation, every scenario we planned for, involved fighting each other because we thought we were alone. Now we know we're not. Now we know there's something out there that makes our worst nightmares look tame. And we also know the thing won't stop. It won't be satisfied. Eventually, it will find Earth. Would you rather face it alone, unprepared, without allies? Or would you rather face it with the knowledge, technology, and support of species who've been fighting it for years? The vote was called. It passed with a narrow majority. Earth would answer the call. The response was crafted carefully, diplomatically, but with an edge that reflected humanity's nature. We received your message. We will help. Send us everything you know about the enemy and await further instructions. 12 hours later, the data began arriving. Terabytes of information flooded Earth's networks. Tactical assessments, enemy capabilities, failed strategies, technology blueprints. The Galactic Council was sharing centuries of accumulated knowledge, desperately hoping humans could find something they had missed. Dr. Chun led the primary analysis team, working 30-hour shifts with stimulants and pure adrenaline, keeping her functional. What she found both fascinated and horrified her. They fight like chess players, she reported to the Coalition Command. Everything is calculated. Optimal fleet positioning. Maximized firepower concentration. Minimal casualties. It's all very logical, very efficient, and it's getting them slaughtered because the Devourers adapt to logic. What do you recommend? Admiral Webb asked. We need to think like humans, not like them, Chun replied. The Devourers learn from patterns. So we don't use patterns. We need strategies that don't make sense mathematically, but work anyway. Feints that waste resources to gain psychological advantage. Sacrifices that look illogical until they create unexpected opportunities. Risks that no sane commander would take. You're describing every major human military victory in history, Webb said with a slight smile. Exactly. Thermopylae, Agincourt, Stalingrad, Midway. Every time humans won against impossible odds, It was because we did something the enemy thought was impossible or insane. We need to apply that thinking on a galactic scale. The coalition began mobilizing. Every nation contributed. Factories retooled for warship production, using alien blueprints modified with human innovation. Volunteers signed up by the millions, knowing they were preparing to fight an enemy they'd never seen for species they'd just learned existed. Training programs combined human military doctrine with alien technology, creating something entirely new. The Vrelniks sent an ambassador to Earth 3 weeks after the initial contact. Ambassador Zelthic materialized in a specially constructed environmental chamber at the Coalition headquarters. His gaseous form rippling with what the translation software indicated was anxiety. "I confess, I did not expect you to respond so quickly," Zelthic said through the translator. "Most species require months of deliberation before committing to military action." Admiral Webb smiled grimly. "Ambassador, humans have been preparing for war since before we discovered agriculture. We've just never had a worthy enemy before. Tell us where you need us." Zelthic shared the current tactical situation. The Devourers had consumed 17 more systems in the past month. The Council's defensive lines were collapsing. Their fleet needed time to regroup, but time was the one resource they didn't have. "We need a delaying action," Zelthic explained. "Something to slow the Devourers' advance, buy us the rotations necessary to consolidate our remaining forces. But every species we send loses ships faster than we can replace them. We cannot afford another devastating defeat." "What if you didn't lose ships?" Dr. Okafor interjected. He'd been standing quietly in the corner, absorbing information. "What if the ships weren't the weapon?" Zelthic's form pulsed with confusion. "I do not understand. You're trying to fight them with overwhelming force, hoping to destroy them faster than they can adapt. That's not working. So instead, we make them adapt to something useless. We waste their time and resources adapting to threats that aren't actually threats. We turn their strength into a weakness." Okafor pulled up a tactical display, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Here's what I'm proposing. We send a small fleet to the Xerxes system, where the Devourers are currently massing for their next offensive. Not enough ships to threaten them, just enough to get their attention. We engage using completely random tactics. No patterns, no logic, just chaos. They'll try." The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit at the edge of the Xerxes system precisely on schedule. 43 ships, a pitiful force by Galactic Council standards, hung in the darkness of space like fireflies against an endless void. Each vessel represented a hybrid of alien technology and human engineering, covered with modifications that made Council observers uncomfortable. Unnecessary protrusions, redundant systems, weapons mounted in configurations that violated optimal firing pattern doctrine. Captain Maria Reeves stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, watching the tactical display update as sensors swept the system. What they found made her breath catch despite months of preparation. "Confirmed Devourer presence," Lieutenant Zhao reported from the sensor station. 72 capital ships, 316 support vessels. Total estimated mass. He paused, recalculating. "Approximately 40 times our tonnage, Captain." "Weapons status?" Reeves asked, her voice steady despite the odds. "All systems green. Railguns loaded. Missile bays full. The experimental packages are ready when you are." Reeves opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Indomitable. You know the mission. You know the stakes. We're not here to win a conventional engagement. We're here to be the most annoying, unpredictable, impossible to categorize threat these things have ever encountered. Make them waste time trying to figure us out. Make them second-guess every pattern recognition algorithm they have. And above all, Make them remember that humans don't fight fair. A chorus of acknowledgments came back, voices from every nation on Earth, speaking dozens of languages, united in one purpose. The Devourer fleet detected them within minutes. The alien vessels began moving with mechanical precision, forming a battle formation that was mathematically perfect for eliminating a smaller force. Their weapons powered up, energy signatures blazing across the sensor grid. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported, sounding surprised. "Put it through," Reeves ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was synthesized, assembled from thousands of other voices, creating a disturbing harmony. "Surrender your vessels. You will be processed." Resistance increases processing time by 0.037%. "This is inefficient." Reeves smiled coldly. "You want efficiency? Let me tell you about human efficiency. We once fought a war that lasted 100 years over a succession dispute. We've built monuments to our dead that took longer to construct than your species has probably existed. We are inefficient by nature, and we're about to make that your problem. Indomitable out." She cut the channel and gave the order. "Execute Plan Chaos." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a coordinated assault. It didn't maintain defensive formation. It didn't do anything that appeared in standard tactical doctrine. 3 ships accelerated at maximum thrust directly at the enemy fleet, weapons blazing wildly in all directions, not even bothering to aim. 2 ships began spinning in place, launching missiles on randomized trajectories. The Indomitable and 5 escorts started flying in a complex pattern that resembled a Celtic knot more than a battle formation. Another group of ships simply sat still, broadcasting gibberish on every frequency while charging weapons they never fired. The Devourers attempted to adapt. Their formations shifted to intercept the charging ships. Point defense systems tracked the random missiles. Analysis subroutines worked frantically to identify the pattern, to predict what the humans would do next. There was no pattern. That was the point. The 3 charging ships suddenly reversed thrust, deployed chaff that blocked sensors, and scattered in different directions. The spinning ships stopped spinning and instead began accelerating on perpendicular vectors. The Indomitable's group abandoned their Celtic, not formation, and reformed into a completely different configuration that served no obvious tactical purpose. "Devourer fleet is showing hesitation," Azal reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Their formation is fracturing. They're trying to adapt to multiple threat profiles simultaneously." "Good," Reeves said. "Phase 2. Launch the packages." From every human ship, cargo pods deployed. They drifted toward the Devourer fleet, broadcasting sensor signatures that identified them as everything from antimatter, warheads to biological weapons to faster-than-light capable bombs. The Devourers couldn't risk ignoring potential threats, so they diverted resources to intercept and analyze each pod. Inside the pods were rocks. Literally just rocks, collected from asteroids, fitted with broadcasting equipment and nothing else. But the Devourers didn't know that. They wasted computational power and weapons fire, destroying hundreds of decoys while the actual human fleet repositioned. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. Humans didn't try to maximize damage or minimize casualties. They tried to maximize confusion. Ships would charge into weapons range, fire a few shots, then retreat for no apparent reason. They would target seemingly random components on Devourer vessels, sometimes weapons, sometimes engines, sometimes apparently useless armor plates. They used tactics that contradicted themselves from one minute to the next. But beneath the chaos was method. While the Devourers focused on the impossible-to-predict human fleet, they failed to notice the Council fleet repositioning according to Dr. Okoffer's plan. Strike forces moved into positions the Devourers had left exposed, assuming no rational commander would sacrifice defensive depth for offensive positioning. The Devourers were learning, though. Their adaptation algorithms worked through the confusion, started to anticipate that the humans would be unpredictable, began to develop counter-strategies based on randomness itself. That's when Captain Reeves gave her second order. All ships. Form Regulation Council Battle Formation Alpha 7. Engage with standard tactical doctrine. The sudden shift to completely conventional tactics caught the Devourers mid-adaptation. Their systems had just finished optimizing for chaos when the humans switched to textbook strategy. The confusion bought precious seconds. Seconds were all the Council fleet needed. Antimatter torpedoes struck Devourer capital ships from unexpected angles. Disintegration beams carved through vessels whose shields were oriented the wrong direction. The carefully constructed Devourer formation collapsed as ships were destroyed or forced to break away. It wasn't a victory. The Devourers still had overwhelming numerical superiority, but it was something they hadn't experienced in decades. A setback. Ships were lost. Resources were expended inefficiently. Time was wasted. Devourer fleet is withdrawing, Zhao announced, his voice filled with disbelief. They're actually retreating to regroup. The bridge of the Indomitable erupted in cheers. They'd done it. A tiny human fleet had accomplished what hundreds of Council fleets had failed to do: make the Devourers hesitate. Reeves opened a channel to the Council flagship, where Ambassador Zelthic was observing the battle. Ambassador, the door's open. I suggest your people use it. Understood, Captain Reeves, Zelthic responded, his translated voice carrying something that might have been awe. The Council fleet is advancing. Your ships should withdraw. You have taken significant damage. Negative, Ambassador, Reeves replied, looking at her tactical display. The Indomitable had lost shields. 2 of her main engines were offline, and hull breaches were venting atmosphere on 7 decks. Around her, the rest of the human fleet was in similar condition. We're going to stay and make sure our new friends stay confused. Besides, we haven't even used our best trick yet. What trick? Zelthic asked nervously. Reeves grinned. The one where we do something so stupid it has to work. She switched to fleet channel. All ships, prepare for ramming speed. Target the largest Devourer vessel. I want to see if these things bleed. Captain, Lieutenant Zhao said carefully, ramming speed will destroy our ships. I know, Reeves said, but we've got escape pods. And I'm betting the Devourers won't expect anyone to sacrifice perfectly functional warships just to prove a point. They're going to waste time and resources trying to figure out why we do something so inefficient. The human fleet accelerated toward the reforming Devourer lines. The alien ships scrambled to respond to this new, seemingly suicidal attack. Point defense systems engaged. Evasive maneuvers were calculated. Resources were diverted from offensive operations to defensive ones. At the last possible second, the human ships deployed every escape pod simultaneously, while their automated systems continued the ramming approach. Hundreds of small pods scattered across the battlefield, while 43 warships bore down on their targets with no one aboard. The Devourers couldn't process it. Automated weapons fire destroyed some of the escape pods, wasting ammunition. Other systems ignored the pods to focus on the unmanned warships. The confusion created gaps in their formation that the Council fleet exploited ruthlessly. When the unmanned human ships finally struck their targets, they'd been rigged with every remaining explosive aboard. The detonations weren't enough to destroy Devourer capital ships, but they damaged shields, disrupted systems, and created chaos at a critical moment. Captain Reeves watched from her escape pod as the Council fleet pressed their ad. 6 months after the Battle of Xerxes, the Galactic Council convened, not in their traditional chamber, but aboard the human vessel Determination. Humanity's first proper flagship built from the ground up with combined human and alien technology. The choice of location was deliberate and symbolic. The Council was acknowledging what the entire galaxy had already accepted. Humanity was no longer a curiosity to be observed from a distance. They were now essential partners in a war for survival. Ambassador Zelthic floated in his environmental tank, studying the assembled representatives. The chamber was smaller than the traditional council hall, but more diverse. Human military officers sat beside Corthan generals. Dishan strategists shared data with Earth's finest tactical minds. Species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence 6 months ago now worked together with desperate efficiency. The Xerxes Gambit bought us time, Zelthic began, using the name that had already entered common usage across council space. 3 systems were evacuated successfully. 47 billion lives saved. The Devourer advance was delayed by 6 weeks while they recalibrated their tactical algorithms. But they are advancing again, and they have adapted. General Amanda Foster of Earth's Coalition Defense Force stood, her uniform crisp despite months of continuous deployment. Adapted how? A Corthan tactical officer brought up a holographic display. They're incorporating randomness into their own strategies now. Not true randomness, but calculated unpredictability. They've learned from their encounter with human forces. Good, Dr. Okafor said from his position near the back of the room. That means they're using processing power on the wrong problem. They're trying to out-crazy us, which is a losing game. Humans have had millions of years of evolution optimizing for creative chaos. They've had a few months. Nevertheless, Zelthic interjected, we cannot rely on the same tactics indefinitely. The Devourers are consuming approximately 1 system every 3 rotations now. Our projections suggest we have less than a standard year before they reach the Council core worlds. We need a permanent solution, not just delaying actions. Captain Reeves, recently promoted to Admiral after her actions at Xerxes, leaned forward. Have we made any progress on understanding what the Devourers actually are? How they think? You can't win a war if you don't understand your enemy. An archivist named Quarn, the same who had originally suggested contacting Earth, activated her translation device. We have studied the Devourers for 7 decades. They appear to be a form of distributed intelligence. Individual ships networked together into a collective consciousness. They consume biological matter and technology to replicate and expand. Their origin is unknown. Their purpose appears to be consumption for its own sake. But they communicate, Reeves pressed. They told us to surrender at Xerxes. That means they have language, which means they have concepts beyond pure consumption. Have we ever tried actually talking to them? Negotiating? The room fell silent. Zelthic's form rippled with what the translation software labeled as embarrassment. We assumed communication was impossible. They have never responded to diplomatic overtures. Because you are probably offering them things they don't want, Dr. Chon said, standing beside Reeves. She'd been promoted to Chief Science Officer and had spent months analyzing every scrap of data about the Devourers. You offered territory, resources, peace. But what if they want something else entirely? Such as? A Veshan delegate asked. A challenge, Chun replied. Think about it. They're a distributed intelligence that grows stronger by consuming other species' knowledge and technology. They've been expanding for decades, encountering hundreds of species, and every single one has fought them the same way, with overwhelming force and logical tactics. What if they're not just consuming civilizations? What if they're disappointed by them? You're suggesting the Devourers are bored? General Foster asked, incredulously. I'm suggesting they're looking for something they haven't found yet, Chun clarified. Humanity caught their attention at Xerxes because we did something they'd never encountered. We fought in ways that didn't make sense. For the first time in decades, They had to actually think instead of just optimizing. What if we could offer them a different kind of challenge? One that doesn't involve destroying civilizations? Okafor was nodding, his mind clearly racing. You want to redirect their purpose. Give them a problem that's more interesting than consumption. It's a theory, Chun admitted, and possibly a dangerous one. But we need to try something other than just fighting. We're losing that war slowly. Zelphic pulsed thoughtfully. The Council would need to approve any attempt at communication. The risk of providing the Devourers with additional strategic information is significant. Then don't tell the Council yet, Reeves said bluntly. Give us a small team. One ship. Let us try to make contact on our terms. If it works, the Council gets credit for trying diplomacy. If it fails, you can blame the crazy humans for acting without authorization. The plan that emerged over the next week was characteristically human in its audacity. A single ship, the science vessel Galileo, would approach the nearest Devourer fleet under a flag of truce, broadcasting on all frequencies. The crew would be minimal. Captain Chun commanding, Dr. Okafor as Chief Science Officer, and a communications specialist named Lieutenant James Rivera, who had a gift for languages. Admiral Reeves wanted to go herself, but General Foster overruled her. We need you coordinating the broader war effort. This is a science mission, not a combat deployment. The Galileo departed from Council space with minimal fanfare, carrying equipment that was equal parts communication gear and weapon systems, because humans always hedged their bets. They found the Devourer fleet in the Kepler 442 system, consuming the remains of a civilization that had evacuated 3 weeks earlier. Broadcasting now, Rivera reported from the communications station. All frequencies, all known languages, and a few mathematical patterns for good measure. The message was simple. We wish to speak. We offer a challenge worth your attention. For 6 hours, there was no response. The Galileo held position at the edge of the system, sensors tracking every Devourer vessel, ready to jump to faster-than-light speed at the first sign of hostility. The crew waited with a kind of nervous tension that made seconds feel like hours. And every screen on the ship activated simultaneously. The Devourer collective consciousness manifested as a swirling pattern of light and sound, coalescing into something approximating a communication interface. Challenge, the voice said. That same disturbing synthesis of thousands of absorbed voices. Define challenge. Chun took a breath, knowing that the next few minutes might determine the fate of civilizations. You consume species to gain their knowledge and capabilities. You fight them to test their worthiness. But you're consuming civilizations that have already given you everything they can offer. You're fighting battles you know you can win. Where's the challenge in that? Elaborate. Humans have a concept called the scientific method. Continuous learning through experimentation and discovery. We solve problems not by consuming those who came before, but by building on their knowledge to create something new. We offer you access to that process. Help us push the boundaries of understanding instead of just absorbing what already exists. The pattern shifted, colors flowing in ways that suggested calculation. You propose cooperation. This contradicts your nature. You fight. We observed at Xerxes. We fight when we have to, Okafor interjected. But we prefer to create, to discover, to push limits. Fighting is just one way we do that. Science is another. If you're truly interested in growth and capability, pure consumption has limits. Eventually, you'll run out of civilizations to absorb. But the universe has infinite mysteries to solve. Insufficient data, the Devourer voice responded. Demonstrate. Chun looked at Okafor, who nodded. This was the moment they'd prepared for. We've developed something we call quantum probability collapse manipulation. It's theoretical physics that none of the Council species have mastered, because it requires thinking in ways that violate conventional logic. We can share the foundational research, but solving it requires a form of intelligence that can process multiple contradictory states simultaneously. Accessing research, the Devourers responded. Somehow, they were pulling data directly from the Galileo's computers, despite all security measures. Chun let them, watching as terabytes of carefully prepared information transferred. The research was real, cutting-edge human physics that even Earth's best scientists barely understood. But it was also incomplete by design, full of paradoxes and contradictions that would require genuine innovation to resolve. For 17 hours, the Devourers processed the data. The Galileo's crew waited, surviving on coffee and nervous energy, wondering if they just handed their enemy a powerful new weapon or offered them something more valuable. Finally, the voice returned. This is interesting. Solutions are not immediately apparent. Processing reveals multiple potential pathways, each creating new questions. This is an F.